Hi guys, so welcome back to another one of my podcasts. My name is Snee, and as of yet, this podcast is still unnamed. I'm thinking of one of two, Snee's POV or the Transform Health podcast. I'm not quite sure what to name it. I like both of them. I've put in a wee poll in my Facebook group as well, and there's the two that I like. There's 10 votes for each of them, so it's neck and neck. I like the Transform Health podcast from the point of view of that is the topics we're going to be covering, is everything health related and functional nutrition. But I also like the self-titled podcast as well. So still as of yet untitled podcast, but we're here for episode 4. So what we're going to speak about today is we're going to break down the science behind behavioural psychology and are you really in control of your food choices. When I was at uni studying nutrition, in first year we had food and consumer science, and the module was basically about what drives marketing and what drives people to consume the foods they do and buy the products they do. And some people will drink out of Starbucks, some people prefer Costa, some people prefer McDonald's to Burger King and vice versa. And it was all about that type of thing, behavioural reasons of why we buy and consume what we consume. And then I didn't really think about it in first year, but it was kind of food psychology. But it was more about the marketing side of things. And then from second year and third year, it was food psychology. We never covered it in fourth year because I was writing dissertation and things like that. But I remember seeing it on my timetable, food psychology, and I remember thinking, this is about to be a lot of nonsense. And it actually blew me away how much sort of clicked with it. I recognised a lot of my own behaviours when I started looking into disordered eating and behaviours around food and stuff. I recognised a lot of behaviours in other people as well. And when it comes to like binge eating disorder and things, that's absolutely rife. So many people struggle with that, but it's almost normalised in our society. So we're going to look at the real factors controlling what you eat and also look at how hyperpalatable foods manipulate your brain. A lot of people go straight away, like carbs make me fat, but when they refer to carbs, they refer to things like pizza and donuts and things like that, maybe pastries, but all these things are high carb and high fat and really, really easy to overeat as well. So it's not necessarily just the carbohydrate there, there's other factors. So look at how you might be stuck in automatic eating habits as well, because most of the food you consume is done subconsciously. You think you are making the choice, but the choice is done out of predetermined habit, and some foods you're psychologically sort of attached to as well, emotionally attached to. Look at sort of how to reprogram your food choices and also why this is really important stuff if you're using a GLP-1 as well. So, as I say, it's a topic that I thought would be a lot of nonsense when I seen it on my uni timetable, and it was in my favourite things. I was in my favourite things while studying nutrition. Right, where will we start? So what really controls your food choices? Well, there are multiple factors in driving what you eat. The main affecting factor is availability. It's the food that's available to availability. It's the food that's available to you. That's why obesity and overweight and things like that is primarily an issue in Western countries in the developing world, because there is more fast food and everything's at the touch of a button. When you look at cultures and places on earth that predominantly live off the land still, they don't really tend to have issues with obesity and overweight and all the related metabolic diseases alongside it as well. So, as well as availability is the biggest factor, as well as what drives you is psychology, food palatability as well. So, you may think you are choosing to have a bit of pizza or a burger or something for lunch when you're out, but really that's that choice is made on a whim, and it's hunger and cravings that are really taking over there. We also have social and cultural influences. Now, this is the thing that really opened my eyes to what we eat. So, in our culture, in the UK culture, Scottish culture, everything, just about every special occasion will be surrounded by food and alcohol. Birthdays, weddings, holidays, funerals, like everything is, food and drink is heavily ingrained in our society, and there is a massive social and cultural influence on the choices you make, the daily food choices you make. For example, how many times you've been out for a meal, and say family meal or a meal with your friends or whatever, and you go out with the best intentions, maybe I'm no drinking, and I'm no drinking, and I'm going to make a better choice. I'm going to get steak and potatoes or something off the menu, instead of going out and just eating whatever. And the minute you get out, the minute you all sit down, you start bouncing off each other. You start asking around the table, what are you eating? What are you having? Are you having a starter? You want to share a starter? Are you having a pint? Are you want a drink? Are you having a drink? No, I've got the car. Somebody will say, I might leave the car, I might ditch the car. And at that point, it no longer becomes your choice. It becomes a group choice. And then you end up making decisions that you wouldn't have made had you been in a house. So it's the social influence that sort of shapes your choice there. But I always say as well, social health is important. It's important to go out and enjoy yourself. It's important to go out for meals and things like that. But it does heavily shape your choice. And another example of that could be at work. You could have your lunch packed with you, your healthy meal, whatever that may be, with you. And then somebody will decide, in my old work in the NHS, John was always bad for one order Domino's from time to time. So the next minute, Domino's will arrive and you're having Domino's. Or when I worked in the NHS, in the X-ray, there was always sweets and cakes, and people were always bringing things in, and there was always things to sort of pick at. So again, that's a social thing. This social impact on food choice. That's not you really going out your way and choosing that. And all these things play a factor in nutrition, diet in general. And it's really interesting. So another factor that plays a role is emotional and psychological triggers. So emotional eating, people just think when they hear emotional eating that they need to be sad, but it could be any emotion that triggers eating. It could be stress, boredom, sadness, even happiness. Like, first thing you do when, certainly the way I've grew up, the first thing that comes to mind when something good happens is like, let's go celebrate, food and alcohol. So again, there are certain foods that you wouldn't be able to, that you're probably psychologically attached to. Some of your favourite foods that make you feel really good when you eat them. Again, these play a role in your daily food choices. Something could trigger you, something that day you could be totally on course for a perfect day's eating, whatever a perfect day's eating may actually be, or whatever your idea is of a perfect day's eating, and then something could happen, something could trigger you, and then you go, fuck it, like, I'm just want to order a takeaway. But that doesn't have to necessarily be something bad. Any emotion could trigger that. As I say, stress, boredom, sadness, happiness, any emotion could trigger that. So you've got all these factors to think about when you're thinking about food choice. A lot of the times you may think you have made that decision, but there are so many other factors that play into what you are actually doing and the decisions you're actually making when it comes to food. In terms of availability, this is one of the reasons that I believe that the country has such a weight issue, is because in terms of availability, a lot of people are struggling with income just now, and a lot of people are in a low income bracket. The food that would be available to them are going to be food that's affordable. And when you look at supermarkets like Iceland, you could get a freezer full of food for still £20-30. Now, if you're trying to buy fresh produce, and if you're like, if you're in a position where you've got a few young kids in the house and you're on a low income and say you've got a partner or something as well and you've got like 5-6 mouths to feed in the house, with the food that's available to you is going to be the cheaper options, and most of the cheaper options are engineered in a way to make you overeat. They're designed for you to keep indulging and overeating. But I do believe that's one of the reasons that we have such an issue with weight control in this country. And as I say, there are many factors to it. There's many factors to obesity. We live in what's called an obesogenic environment. So you'll notice when you go to supermarkets that you're picking up things, and again, I've just touched on this, you're picking up things and you're making decisions that you wouldn't even have thought about until you're in the shop. It's because of the way things are positioned. You'll see things like 2-for-1 offers on things, and it's actually cheaper to buy the 2 than the 1 sometimes, or it's cheaper to buy a multi-pack than to buy 1 or whatever. It's just the way things are positioned. They're designed to get you to consume and overeat. And things like when you go to checkouts and things, there'll be sweets and crisps and stuff like that directly at the checkouts. And if you've got young kids asking for stuff and things like that as well, all these things are set up. It's called an obesogenic environment. It's set up in a way that the environment makes you consume and overeat. And all these things play a role in your food choice. So the illusion of choice, are you really deciding? So illusion of choice, are you really deciding what you eat? So research has shown that so the illusion of choice, are you really deciding what you eat? Many of our food choices are subconscious and driven by external cues, as I've spoke about. All these different aspects that actually make you make the decision you're not even aware of. Certainly I wasn't aware of until we started studying this stuff. I used to just think that nutrition is very black and white. You're either on a diet or off a diet, and that tends to be the general sort of thought process that people do have, which is why people yo-yo diet back and forward. So all this stuff is really helpful just to be aware of. Now, the social situations, I'm not saying to no go out and no eat out, because I actually encourage people to do that. I think that's a good thing to have a healthy social life. But just be aware, it's no 100% you that's making the choice. Your social circle will influence what you do at that moment in time. It's just good to be aware of these things. So, there's research found that over 200 food-related decisions are made every day, yet we only think about 15 of them, which means most of your behaviours are automatic and subconscious. You don't even think about them. So that's how I'm always trying to hammer home to people the importance of habits and behaviours and things like that. Because once you build a habit of doing a certain thing every day, that will be your subconscious default. You will automatically make the choices once it's practiced enough. Whereas if you are just in a habit, for example, going to work unprepared and eating out of Costa or the Bakers or McDonald's or something every day, that'll be your default, and you'll get to the point where you don't even think about it. You just do it. You just do it automatically. So the behavioural side of nutrition is really important to work on. And at the beginning, it's just simply about being aware of these things before you even start working on them. So I came across this study that I've just dug out when I was at uni, and this blew my mind. It was done at Stanford University, and it examined how branding influences affect young children's taste preferences. So 63 children aged 3 to 5, and the children sampled 5 foods: chicken nuggets, hamburger, french fries, baby carrots and milk. Each food was divided into 2 identical portions. One was in McDonald's packaging and the other was in unbranded packaging. 4 out of 5 of the foods, chicken nuggets, fries, carrots and milk, significantly more children preferred the taste when they believed it was from McDonald's, despite the foods being identical. And the additional insights that they found was children with more televisions at home or children who ate McDonald's. Children who ate McDonald's more frequently, start that again. So the additional findings were children with more televisions at home or children that ate McDonald's more often were more likely to prefer the food that was in the McDonald's packaging, regardless, although it was the same food. It was identical food. Now, that to me is just mind-blowing. It's aged 3 to 5, and that just shows how powerful marketing is at shaping your food choices from such a young age. And it was more the carrot sticks, like for the baby carrots, for children to even prefer them anyway, like just because they were a McDonald's wrapping is crazy. And it just goes to show how much of our behaviours and things around food are driven by marketing and really aren't our choice. There was also, like, when you think about environmental priming, it's called. Like, there will be certain foods that go with certain places. Like, if you ever go to the pictures to see a film, it will be, you automatically have a hot dog or grab popcorn. And these are foods that you probably will never ever eat in the house. But that's called environmental priming. So there's all these things. It's so crazy when you start thinking about all these additional influences, and it makes it almost impossible for people to stick to a diet if you aren't aware of all these things. And even the term diet, it almost throws up images of constant restriction. Now, if people could work on their behaviours and their habits, all these things wouldn't be an issue, because you would still eat out. You would still eat your hot dog and popcorn at the pictures. You would still go to McDonald's or whatever, but you would have your habits in order in all the other times in the week that they one or two instances of eating out wouldn't even have an impact on your overall health, body shape, or an impact on if you're training or whatever. They wouldn't have an impact. They have an impact when it becomes habitual and you do it daily, and maybe you drink all weekend or whatever. That's when it has an impact on your health, your physique, your well-being, etc. But as I say, all this stuff's really interesting, but in the beginning, you just, even to be aware of them is a start, because I certainly never, until I formally studied, I certainly never looked at things in this manner. I just looked at things very black and white, like a lot of people do. If you're in a phase of trying to lose weight, you knuckle down and you get your diet head on. And obviously, like, I was around boxing clubs and kickboxing clubs a lot when I was younger, so the thing was just to run it off. So that was always my go-to for years. But it wasn't until I actually started looking at all this stuff that I thought, wow, there's so much more involved. Like, you could have the best diet, you could have the perfect diet, although I believe the perfect diet doesn't exist. But hypothetically, you could have the perfect diet on paper if your behaviours, habits, events, all that type of thing, if they have that much of an influence on your choices that you make, then you're not going to be able to stick to it. And a lot of people ask for, could I just get a one-off diet plan, just you tell me what to eat? Now, that's all fine and well, but you're not going to be able to stick to that forever. A week, two, and then it'll start to feel like torture. And then that's when the wheels come off and all these things take over, all these default behaviours take over and start making you, and then that's what leads to people going on a diet to off a diet. They get to the point where they think it's an all or nothing mindset. They get to the point where they think, I can't put up with this diet anymore, and then they'll go, fuck it. 2 weeks later, they've been eating nothing but this type of stuff. And then they go back to, right, I need to get the weight off. I need to be perfect again. No, perfection does, and it probably makes it. The thought of perfection and the pursuit of perfection, the thought of perception, I'll try that again. The thought of perfection and the pursuit of perfection are probably making it much harder for you ever to stick to a diet. ever to stick to a nutrition plan, because all these things, all these external influences, some are internal, some are external, these will take over. So, how food marketing manipulates your brain. So, I just touched on that with the McDonald's thing. And there's an interesting thing with kids' cereal as well, like all the characters on kids' cereal boxes, that if you look at them, their eyes face down the way, so that when kids are walking about the supermarkets and that and looking up, they almost feel the characters looking at them. It's kind of creepy as well, but it's mad. So that in turn makes them aware of it and makes them want to buy it, and it's crazy. Kind of touched on all this as well. Supermarkets are designed to increase impulse purchase. That is known as what's called an obesogenic environment, as I've said. So things like the 2-for-1 offers and the specials are all designed to get you to over-consume, and the sweets around checkouts and things like that are designed to make they're designed for you to impulse buy. Normally the healthier stuff, the whole food stuff, you've actually to go hunting for up aisles. Everything else is just at the front door, at the checkouts, on the perimeter of the supermarket. It's all really designed for you to go in and just buy hyper-palatable foods. So the science of dopamine cravings and mindless eating. Dopamine spikes when you anticipate eating something rewarding. So even when you start thinking about the food you want, you start to get a pleasure response from it. Sugar and fats, they trigger dopamine release. So this is how all these foods are engineered like that. They're high fat, high sugar, high carb, really tasty, hyper palatable foods. So it's the taste and that feeling of the dopamine release that you are going back for time and time and time again. It's not so much you're not eating it out of necessity, you're eating it out of want for a reward, basically. So this is why these foods are designed like that. And again, as I said at the start, it's like people will say, oh, I can't tolerate carbohydrates, or carbs make me fat. But when they refer to carbs, that's what they're referring to. They're referring to hyper-palatable junk foods, which oftentimes aren't just high in carbohydrate, they're high in fat as well. And they're designed for you to keep eating. They're designed for you to get that reward response in the brain, but for you to keep going back and back and back. So how to take back control of your food choices, right? Just a wee bit on things you can do to try and prevent all this. And as I say, just at the very, very start of thinking like this, just being aware of it is important, to be honest, because it's not really things that people think about in general. Is the psychology towards foods they eat, why they eat them. And it does play a massive, massive role in your overall health and your overall ability to stay a healthy weight. And a lot of them, as I say, are subconscious. So one is control your food environment. Now, that means you've heard people, bound to have heard people online before saying, just get all the junk food out of your house, empty your cupboards. Now, that's easier said than done, because if you've got kids, then you're going to have stuff in the house for them. But keeping them out of sight is one way, and make sure you stock up. Make sure you focus on your high protein, high fibre, healthy meals first, and make sure you manage hunger as well, because if your hunger's managed, you're less likely to get that emotional response. When you start to get hungry, it's like emotion takes over, your subconscious takes over. So if you manage hunger to the point where you're not quite allowing that, you'll tend to snack less and eat less of this stuff, because it tends to be that. I see it a lot in people. They'll maybe no eat all day, or be too busy to eat all day, or claim to be too busy to eat all day, and then at night they'll just make the wrong choices, or they'll overeat on the wrong choices because they're essentially starving. Number 2 is to use mindful eating practices. So slow down, chew more, and eat distraction free. Again, this is all good in theory, but I find, like, before I started using the GLP-1, I've always been a garnet, to be honest. I always had issues with binge eating and things as well, as to say. But the pace I eat it is unreal. And the very first week I started the GLP-1, I noticed I was putting my fork down between bites. And I was like, what the fuck? I've never done this before in my life. And it was kind of out, man. It was like, so even the pace and things I eat it's not a necessity. Eat like you've been starved on my days and far from it. So, use mindful eating practices. Slow down, chew more, and eat distraction-free. And number 3 is identify and rewire emotional eating patterns. Now, this is the type of thing that I'm saying to you. All these external and internal food cues, the social impact, the psychological impact, and just the food that's available to you and things like, just be aware of it in the beginning. Just being aware of it will help you make more informed choices. Not so much the social one, because I'm always saying to people, like, you need a social life. You need to go out. You need to enjoy your food with your friends, family, whatever. You need to go out. If you drink, go out and drink. That's got to be part of your life anyway. So, but it's just when you're really, really deep down thinking about it, it is just mad how much your social environment, your friends and family do shape your choices as well, and you'll have an impact on their choices as well. It goes both ways. So, but when it comes to emotional eating patterns, and this is what I'm saying to people that are using GLP-1s, is try and food journal. Try and take notes of when you would be making wrong choices, because using a GLP-1, it becomes even more apparent to you. I'm not so sure at higher doses when it completely wipes out your appetite, but certainly at the lower doses, you're still aware of the food choices you're making. It just allows you to make better choices. Now, if you're somebody who's got a long-standing issue with that, then you could take notes, you could food journal, and you could actually, like, even notes on how you're feeling and, like, what would the triggers, being aware of the triggers that would normally cause you to overeat or drink or whatever. So journaling's a good way to do that. Whether you're on a GLP-1 or not, it just makes you aware of why you actually eat. Because a lot of the times people eat, it's not out of hunger. It's out of any of these factors that I've just spoke about that trigger the last bit. So why this all matters for GLP-1 users and long-term weight loss. Many people say online that using a GLP-1 doesn't allow you to fix your behaviours, doesn't allow you to fix these issues around food, because it just wipes out your appetite and you're not thinking about food and you'll gain the weight back and blah, blah, blah. When actually, in actual fact, it's the opposite. When people use these, they become more aware. Well, I would normally be eating this, but I've chose this. They become more aware of the wrong food choices they're making. As I've said, maybe at higher doses, it just gets to the point where you can't eat. And as I say, I'm not an advocate of that. I think that's an issue in itself, to be honest. But on the lower end of the dosing, people are still aware of the food choices they're making. And it's actually teaching them about how much wrong food they actually choose, or how much their habits are ingrained in just doing a certain thing every day, going to the baker's every day, eating that cake at work every day. Switches the cravings off to the point where you could still eat, but you're aware of all these things. I would normally be hearing them, but I don't want them. And it allows people, if they really focus on their behaviours, it allows people to really notice their issues around food. It allows people to really work on them. So, but again, as I keep saying, with GLP-1 use, this whole thing that I've spoke about, this applies to everyone. But when people were using a GLP-1, argued that they need to be even more aware of all this stuff. Because if you are just using it to remove your appetite, lose the weight, and then come off it, you will gain all that weight back. It's 100%. But that goes for any diet. That goes for any diet at all. If you go on a diet for the summer and then come off it and go back to normal, you will gain all the weight back. So it's the same with or without GLP-1s. If you go back to old habits, you will gain the weight back. It's even more important that people really focus on their behaviours. I use that. If you're going to all the bother of even using them in the first place, use it to identify all these things around your behaviours and habits and emotional attachments to food. And if the more you become aware of all this stuff and the more you work on it psychologically, the higher chance of success you're going to have at keeping weight off long term, staying healthier long term, when you do eventually decide to come off it. If you eventually decide to come off it. But I certainly don't see why these need to be used forever. I just don't see it. And I see people getting amazing results out the lower end of the dosing and being able to work on all these things at the same time. So yeah, that whole episode there was just really about sort of an introduction to the psychology of food, the behavioural psychology around food, and why we could go on and on and on. The availability thing and the obesogenic environment thing, they are really interesting because they are probably major causes of why, as a nation, we are so overweight. But these things are so complex and so detailed that you could probably speak for hours on end about them. And as far as GLP-1, the role that GLP-1 plays in the overall obesity epidemic, I think it can help people. But is it gonna solve the world's issues or the Western world's issues or certainly the UK's issues? No chance. There's too many different factors involved in shaping people's nutritional habits that is only a small piece of the pie, like the psychological, because that works on slowing digestion, reducing cravings, so that you can actually work on your food, which is good for the individual and good for the psychology of the individual, and it will help them get weight off. But there's so many other factors out with your control that contributes to us as a nation overall being overweight. Availability, affordability, the obesogenic environment we live in. There's so much things, the social environment, the social situation you find yourself in. There's so much other stuff going on that GLP-1 certainly going to save the day when it comes to the obesity issue and the problem. When it comes to the obesity issue in the country, but it certainly plays a role at an individual level in helping people get weight off. But anyway, this episode wasn't about GLP-1s. I just thought I'd touch on it because it is even more important for people on GLP-1s to be aware of all this stuff. And being aware of all this stuff and working on all this stuff is probably the route to you having long-term success. So, thank you very much. If you've got this far and watched the whole podcast, if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel, that would be amazing. And if you need any more information on nutrition, performance, diet and and if you need any more information on nutrition, GLP-1, training, anything at all, feel free to drop me a DM. And if you would like to work with me on any of my programs, if you need to lose weight, if you need to improve your performance, or you're thinking about using GLP-1 but you want to do it as safely as you possibly can, then drop me a DM and we could sort that out. But if you could like, subscribe, all that good stuff to the YouTube channel. And thank you very much for listening. Cheers, guys.